Everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight on Zoom or in person here at City Hall. This is the first of two public information meetings. So we're going to share some information about the proposed Aquatic Center for Waukee in the upcoming bond referendum so that when you go to vote, you have all the information you need. So feel free to ask questions. If you are on Zoom, you can use the Q&A feature there in your panel to submit a question at any time. We'll probably save most of those for the end. Or if you prefer to ask your question, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you when it's time for that to ask your question that way too. And then with us tonight, we have Matt, our Public Works Director, representing the city. Parks and Recreation Director, right. Excuse me. And then we have Kyle with Water's Edge, which is the firm that helped us do the feasibility study. So he's going to take you through pieces of this as well. Again, if you have clarifying questions, feel free to kind of raise your hand and ask those along the way. Otherwise, we'll have some Q&A time at the end as well. Okay.
Right. Thanks, Heather. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Like Heather stated, over the last year, we've had an aquatics feasibility study completed. One of the things that the city council is hearing, and I hear as the Parks and Recreation Director from a lot of people in this community, is the desire for an aquatic center. A little over a year ago, the council made it a priority to complete a feasibility study to, in essence, determine whether this community would be able to support an aquatic center. Back in 2010 was the last time an aquatic center was voted on here in Waukee. It did fail, although we are a much different community today than we were back in 2010. After a lot of research and the analysis of our surrounding communities, how big this facility, what types of features, multiple public input meetings, Water's Edge finished the feasibility study and provided a final report of the characteristics that this aquatic center might have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle McCauley from Water's Edge to go through some of the characteristics and the final concepts of the plan that was presented to the city council.
Thanks, Matt. So based off of the feasibility study and the public engagement and the surveys that were done, we developed a concept. So currently the concept is to go here on this site that is between 6th and University. This would be part of the future civic campus, would be the aquatic center would be a part of that. And then when this would go is projected here. So not immediately, but the plan is to have this up and operational in 2027, excuse me. So this is the layout. Again, as Matt said, this was based and generated off the input that received during the feasibility study. So a lot of key components that we were hearing from the public were lazy river, leisure play, space for people to relax and swim laps, many different types of amenities, and we're kind of going to go through some of these different features in a little more detail, just give you a little bit of a perspective of what those actually mean. So one of the main areas is the leisure pool. So this would be a shallow water pool going from a depth of 0 to about 3.5 feet. And one of the key components of that is just general play for little guys up to middle schoolers. So it would have basketball hoops and benches and those type of things in that area, in addition to some smaller scale water slides. So maybe slides that aren't that some of those adventurous little guys are ready for, but they're not tall enough for the really large water slides. So a variety of those slides were important to incorporate, and that's part of the pool. Probably one of the other main features, the biggest feature, is the lazy river. So the lazy river has a lot going on with it. It's one of the longest ones we've ever planned for. But some of the key components of that is it have water slides around it, a deep water section in the middle of it, and different portions around it that could be used for rental space. For anyone visiting the center could rent one of the shade canopies around the lazy river as additional revenue source. as part of it, one of the key things we heard is offering accessibility play areas. So one of it will be a ADA compliant splash pad area. So very minimal water, no standing water, but a lot of interaction. So it have a play structure that would anchor this portion of the facility, and it would be fully accessible. So accessible ramps, make sure that it has the width for chairs, and all the compliant needs that we would have in that, for this amenity. Here's some just general images of similar types. The actual amenity or the structure itself has not been designed or finalized, but it has water slide potentials, different elevations that kids can go up on, play on, interact with water cannons and dumping buckets and those type of things. Here's some of the features of what would go in that leisure pool. So in addition to the water slides, you can see the basketball hoops. We hear a lot about having shade and benches within the water. That seems to be real important to people, and just different types of water slides and amenities. So as kids get more comfortable with the water, we can start them with these smaller amenities, and they can grow with throughout the facility. Some images of just potential kind of representation of what that lazy river would look like. So large enough to have inner tubes floating around. Seem to be really important to have that shade in and over the water. And then you can see here in the bottom some renderings of potential those rentable spaces along the river itself. Excuse me. So in the lazy river, as part of that basin, would have water slides. So you can see here in the middle, there's a lot of opportunities for different types of water slides. So water slides that one person can slide down, speed slides, and then one like this yellow one here that an inner tube could go down. So the facility's been designed to have a variety of different water slides, trying to make sure we have a broad appeal to different people that want to use this facility. In the middle of the lazy river is a deep water basin, so deeper water down to 12 feet, diving boards and those type of things. So those for those activities. And then pulled off away from the main part of the pool is a lap pool. And so it would be compliant with the distance of what we typically see in swimming events, but the intent is not to build a competitive venue. It was just to have a space that we can do water aerobics in, we can do swim lessons in, and also kind of pull it away from the really high activity areas, the water slides, the lazy rivers, the ADA splash pad, have this space that can maybe be used for a calmer, more serene type of environment, but still within the pool. And the thought, some of this imagery, the thought is to actually elevate it. So that perspective in that pool, you can oversee the rest of the facility. And then we think there's a nice opportunity to have a curtain wall of some sort, have a nice artistic kind of feature in front of that water. Can never put too much shade in these facilities. We've found out since all the years we've been doing this. So spread throughout the facility are just different areas of shade, different areas of seating. The intent, or what we see real appealing from people that use these facilities, is not all concrete. So there's a mixture of landscape, there's a mixture of softer grass spaces, so that it's not all hard concrete. And it just kind of gives a nice place so people can move around and explore different areas of the pool or the facilities. Water use of facilities like this is really something important that we try to really make sure we're being sensitive to. So our projection is about 10,000 to 15,000 gallons a day, and that comes from splash out and evaporation that just occurs in any pool that we encounter. But we also want to kind of have a sense of what are we going to need for concessions, what are we going to need for the bathroom facilities. So that's rolled into that number. But as we design this, and as we would get into the more detailed design, we'd really put a focus on efficient equipment. So efficient pumps that use the minimum amount of power that we may need. filtration systems and chlorine systems, disinfection systems that are real sensitive to water consumption. So we really want to try to explore those opportunities and make sure this facility in that pump room and what goes on in the back of the house is being real mindful of the water consumption. Going to get into the details of the finances. But I'll take questions later.
So as far as the financials of aquatic center or a aquatic center of this magnitude, as part of the final report showed, based on Water's Edge's expertise and looking at our surrounding neighbors and so forth, the estimated annual revenue is $435,000 to $644,000. Obviously, with a facility like this, that's weather dependent and so forth. But within that revenue, you can see what's built into that is season passes, daily passes, rentals, concessions, water aerobics in your classes and your swim lessons. Annual expenditures are estimated anywhere from $545,000 to $678,000. What would go in that would be your personnel, your utilities, your chemicals, and then just overall commodities and contractual services. So Water's Edge has projected that our cost recovery would be between 80% and 95%, depending on the year. As far as projected cost to build this facility, as Water's Edge was putting together the financials or the final report, this is taking into consideration 2025, 2026 numbers. City already owns the land. As we talked about earlier in the slide, it would be located in the northwest corner of the Civic Campus. $33 million for design, site work, and construction of the facility is the estimate. The bond referendum is for up to $35 million to allow for increases for materials, labor between now and construction. So overall, the cost down below, construction 24 to 29 million, and then contingency and soft costs are design, fees and construction administration and so forth. So that's where we got our number of not to exceed 35 million. Overall funding model for a project like this that the council has approved is 60% from increase to city tax levy, which is your property taxes, to build the facility. 30% of that would come from the current levy revenues, and 10% from other sources such as local option sales tax and our public improvement fund. So one of the questions that we got is, if this were to pass, how much would my taxes go up? We've put together a little chart here. It's about $34 per year per $100,000 in valuation of your home. So you would, in essence, take the estimated valuation of your home and you would divide it by 100,000 and then multiply that by 34 to get your annual increase in taxes. Okay, so on the ballot, what are you going to see the day of November 5th? This is the exact language that you will see. It will be not to exceed 35 million. Utilizing municipal bonds, and this will be exactly what you'll see the day of. It'll be towards the end. It'll be under the local questions. There's a couple other local questions there, but the one for this bond referendum would be right here in the bottom. It does require a 60% of voters to approve it for the measure to pass. So it would be a 60% approval or higher for it to go forward. So tonight, what we wanted to do is address some of the other questions that we've been hearing. Our marketing and communications team has been receiving and kind of walk through some of those. So what would it cost to use the aquatic center? right now, we don't know what the exact admission cost will be. However, we do know that we will have to be competitive with our local or our surrounding communities. And so the daily admission price now is probably going to be different than in 2027 when we open. So we have not set those exact fees, but it will be competitive with our neighbors. Season passes, $100 for an individual or $225 for a family. That's what they are today. We have not set those. However, we do know we will be much like our neighbors in the fact that there will be resident and non-resident fees for season passes. Currently, I believe residents that are going over to Clive are spending roughly $150 more than the Clive residents are for their season passes. Day passes will range anywhere from $3 to $10 per person based on age. That's consistent with the entire Des Moines Metro today. So we anticipate, again, that we will be competitive with our neighbors. One question I get is, how will we staff this? You know, the National Pool Code designates how many lifeguards we have to have for each amenity and for the surface body of water. It's estimated we would need, in the current design, we'd need roughly 25 to 33 staff members on at one given time. You can see kind of the breakdown of that 25 to 30. As far as overall, what we anticipate that we would need to hire is roughly 50 to 60 lifeguards each season. What kind of programs? This was something that we got a lot of feedback on within our survey results. We heard a lot of people wanted swim lesson opportunities. A lot of people wanted adult and senior citizen activities. So we will determine what exactly those programming opportunities are. But we know that from the survey results, and as we get a little closer, we want to meet as many people's needs as we can with our programming, such as water fitness. And the other thing that came out of that survey was opportunities for birthday parties, birthday parties and other private events. So, and rental facilities. So from there, yes.
Okay, so now we can take some questions if you want to ask any clarifying questions or there's something else you want to know. We had a couple that were submitted, so I'll start with those. So some of our neighbors have sometimes had trouble hiring staff for their pools in the past years, and maybe had to limit their operating hours at times. So how is Waukee kind of planning for something like that?
So that's a great question. We're not unique in the fact that currently today we already hire close to 200 seasonal staff. So we know that the hiring process is different today than it was, 10 years ago, as far as strategies to attract people. As far as lifeguards, we know that back 10, 15 years ago, you might be able to hire a lifeguard for $7 an hour. And it used to be the job everybody wanted. We know that we have to be competitive with our neighbors as it relates to rate of pay, but then also utilize our other strategies that we've used throughout the last couple of years to hire close to 100 people out at Triumph Park and then out at our golf course as well, just naming a few in our Parks and Rec department. So, it is a challenge, but I can tell you our neighboring communities, it's always different and it's a challenge, but they've always been able to hire enough lifeguards to make it work.
Okay, and the other one that got pre-submitted was, is this replacing or being prioritized for any other planned additions or renovations in the community? So I think it's asking if it's replacing any amenities or if there'd be kind of future additions to that as well.
I wouldn't say it's replacing any amenities. We've talked about the location. Excuse me. It is part of the overall civic campus master plan. So it will be eventually surrounded by other amenities that we're planning on having within that civic master plan or civic campus.
All right, so if you're on Zoom, feel free to type one into the Q&A feature or raise your hand with the raised hand icon and we can unmute you. But otherwise, I'll turn it over to folks here in the room if anybody has a question.
Okay, I can count 8 swimming pools already in this town. So why do we need another one? And then what if you can't have 33 people on site? So it sets there like a white elephant for that day.
So as a part of our overall design, first of all, I'll answer the second part first. As our overall design, we did intentionally look at ways that you could modify the number of lifeguards that would have to be on duty at one given time. I'm confident that we won't ever have a day where we just can't get any lifeguards. So that's to answer your first or your second question. Your first question is although we have a bunch of pools in town, the one question that we get as elected officials and myself as a Parks and Rec director is why doesn't this town have an aquatic center? And so through that, we went through this feasibility study and then we're putting it out on a ballot to let the public decide.
I remember years when this was, I put a pool in for my kids. And it lasted about 6 to 8 years. The kids were done with it and it was gone.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna be sitting there with the expense of it if there's not enough people to.
Yeah.
You know, and then, how are you gonna get people there? I mean, University Avenue goes right straight over there. That benefits every licensed driver in the city. This benefits the few that want to use it.
Yeah. Joni.
I know this is gonna be popular, what I'm gonna say, but.
Hold on one sec. I'm going to have you ask. I should have done that the first time. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, instead of raising my taxes, why not have the people who are going to be utilizing this pay more? Because my guess is it's not going to be the majority of the people of Waukee that are really going to utilize this facility.
Yeah, I would, on the second part of your statement, as far as overall usage, I would say that we would be closer to 70, 25, 70% Waukee residents, 25. Now, that might change. It might be a little different the first year because it's the new shiny object in the community. But long-term, I think people will go back to their, their hometown aquatic centers, and it will primarily be Waukee residents. Now, as we all know, it's also based on the school district as well, as far as the people that we see utilizing our current parks. It's really they want to live or they want to work. Sorry. They want to play with the people that they go to school with. As far as, I guess I'm at a loss for, maybe Brad can.
Sure. Brad Dietz, City Administrator. Yeah, I guess you need to really look at it. There's 2 pots of money, right? There's the construction budget and then there's the operating budget. So, and that's how it was kind of laid out relative to the slides here tonight is there's a physical cost to build a facility like this. And the reality is you can't depend upon the revenues for the users, if you will, to pay for that initial construction cost. So we have to have the ability to have the money up front to pay for that. We've tried to look at opportunities where we can utilize some of our existing debt levy that we have available to us. We've been fortunate in that we do have other funding sources, such as some partnerships we have with Apple that also bring money into building this facility. But the reality is if the public, the overall public majority wants this, there is a cost to building it. So, and ultimately that's what we're putting out there for the public to decide on is, are you willing to pay the additional costs and taxes to build the facility? So.
Okay, we had one come in on Zoom, so I'll ask that one. If it happens to not be self-sustaining, where would we get the money for future maintenance and upkeep?
as stated in the slides, we don't anticipate that you're always going to be recovering all of your operating costs. I think if you look around the metro, you look around the state, typically these facilities aren't, if you will, paying for themselves 100%. Now, I would say the first few years, again, that new shiny object, it very well may make some money. I think we've seen that in some of the other communities, but over time it won't. Obviously, from a maintenance standpoint, cost of improving that, those would be capital equipment purchases that we would have to incorporate into our annual capital improvement plan. And those, I mean, that's pretty typical of our parks. That's pretty typical of our youth sports complex, and that there's certain things that eventually wear out and have to be replaced. And we just have to plan accordingly for that in our annual capital improvement plan. And then the other side, they're more than likely it's the operating side, and that comes out of the Parks and Recreation budget. So we adjust, again, like we do with a lot of things. I wouldn't say there's very few of our programs that the city puts on that are paid for entirely with those that are using it. There's always some compensation that's made up through our general fund revenues through the Parks and Recreation Department. We did it.
Okay, does anyone else in the room have a question?
Yeah, Nate.
I'm curious what the population of Waukee is today and what it was, 10 years ago, and what the future projections are. That's one question. And then I wondered if you could speak to the location, how it's, kind of on the west side of Waukee, and why that location and how that relates to the future.
Appreciate that. In terms of population, I actually just looked that up today, so I know exactly what it was. In 2010, the last time that the there was a referendum that was put on the ballot for an aquatic center, the population was 14,000. Today, we are estimated, and we'll verify this with our special census numbers, hopefully by the end of the year, that we're about 32,000. We're projecting long-term the growth of the city, full build out, you're at 75 to 80,000. But generally speaking, over the last 5 years, we've been growing roughly 1,800 to 2,000 people on an annual basis. So pretty significant growth. Obviously, that's not going to sustain forever and ever and ever. But for the last 5 to 10 years, that's been our trajectory. And I would anticipate that at least for the next 5 to 10 years. In terms of location and why is this sited here, again, a lot of people would say, well, this is kind of on the western edge of Waukee. Which certainly today it is, but long-term, if you look at, again, we do a lot of strategic planning and long-term planning. This is essentially the middle of Waukee long-term. And so from a standpoint of location, we felt it was important to locate it here. Obviously, the city owns this property as well, which is a deciding factor. We are making significant improvements to the transportation network, including University Avenue. That's regardless if this project were to move forward, those improvements have to be done and will be done over the next 5 to 7 years, I think, by the time it's all fully built out, because there are multiple phases of that to be completed. We also strive pretty hardly in terms of our planning and then execution from a pedestrian realm. And so there'll be a lot of connectivity, both east and west, as well as north and south from our various trail networks throughout the community.
Okay, I think there was another question.
Thanks. I wish this could have been done 30 years ago. I'm too old to enjoy this as I wish I could, but a couple of questions. I'm also very conservative fiscally. So when the plan was put together, I know you spent a lot of time on feasibility studies, but was there we could go up to 50 million, or we need to stick to, is there any other option if we could only raise 20 million? If it doesn't pass, is there another option?
I would say that the consultants really, certainly there's all sorts of options, right? I mean, you can start to pick things apart and it's going to cost less. But the thought, I think, from the mayor and city council as they reviewed and analyzed this was that, obviously we're building this for the current population, but we're also building it for the future population. And so, the concern was if you don't build it big enough, are you, really making it, because we're only going to build this once, right? We're not going to come back and build multiples of these and so forth. So there was some sizing based upon both existing population as well as projecting out for future population. And obviously then the costs dictate that and so forth. So, all of the existing facilities in the metro were analyzed relative to that. And that sizing was really based upon our current population, the demand that we saw in the area. So there was also a demand factor that was put in based upon user rates of other facilities and where people are going today. And then again, looking kind of long-term big picture of not scaling this the wrong size for the future population of the city.
And logistically, it's across the street from Sugar Creek, so it wouldn't ever affect the ability to increase the golf course. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. So the city owns 225 acres. I think this would set on like maybe 5 acres of that. It's a pretty small component relative to the larger campus. As Matt had indicated, we're currently, I would say 3/4 of the way through doing some master planning of that entire area, which part of that is discussions on whether or not Sugar Creek could and would expand into the future. So that's all been accommodated. 225 acres, that's a lot of room to do a lot of things. So we would certainly have the ability, if that were the direction in the future, to expand Sugar Creek.
And the building that was shown on the drawing, what else? That's concessions, restrooms? Is
So
there
the
re-
building, right now, as far as the overall building, we, with the help of Water's Edge, it's really about square footage for this size of a facility. But this would be your traditional concessions and your bathhouse and your admissions and everything. And then the building up top would be all your mechanicals.
And my last question, we built a house down on Parkview Drive in like 94. And we were told university would be going through in 5 years.
Yeah.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yep. You're absolutely right. I mean, I've been here and Matt's been here since 04. I've been here since 06 and it's been talked about since then. What I can definitively tell you is the first phase is scheduled for bidding here over the winter and construction beginning next year. Again, it's a multi-phase project, so it's not going to happen super quick, but the city council has prioritized University Avenue as their largest infrastructure project moving forward over the next 5 years. And we're to the point where we absolutely need it from a population standpoint and transportation network.
Coming over your shoulder.
Oh, okay. I guess I should have asked this when I had the mic before, is that the more I think about this, and I know you did, from a city perspective, you did what you heard from a lot of your constituents and everything. So I'm not faulting any of you for what you have done. But I guess for me as one individual, I look at this and this is a 3-month revenue item that just seems, wow, in my estimation, it just does not seem like that is a real good way of spending our dollars.
All right, I don't have any more questions on Zoom. So if there's any more in the room, we can happily take those. Or if you're on Zoom and you have a question, this is kind of your last call to get it typed in there. Do we have any hands raised? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much for everybody for coming. We did record this, so we'll pop it up on our YouTube channel here in the next, well, probably early next week. So if you want to revisit anything, feel free. Can you click through to the end for me? No worries. So we have a couple of places to go for more information too. So we have, a lot of what we presented tonight here, plus a few more kind of questions that we've gotten at waukee.org/aquatic center. So feel free to go there, share that with neighbors who may have questions as well. And then DallasCountyIowa.gov, it would be a good place to go for voting information. So if you want to look at your sample ballot and see what it looks like, where the question is, or anything else you'll be asked, or you need help getting registered and all that, you can go there for that information. But otherwise, thanks for coming. And we have another meeting on the 24th if you hear anybody who missed it tonight that would like to attend.